Hey there, my name's Mark McCartney and welcome to the What is a Good Life podcast. Over the last 3 years, I've interviewed over 250 people around this question, not to prescribe you with a universal answer, but to help you explore this question for yourself. I'm hoping the guests' musings, curiosities, experiences, and anecdotes will prompt your own inquiry into what this question means for you. While I'm also trying to share with you what I perceive to be more genuine expressions of the human experience and indeed more meaningful conversations. Which brings us to this week and the 104th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Karen Maurice-O'Leary. Kaz is a highly awarded brand storyteller and well-being leadership speaker, recognised for promoting human-first environments and their impact on innovation. A New Zealander living in California, she has had an international career in advertising and creative technology with major brands and Fortune 500 companies. Her roles have included creative product lead at Meta LA, creative director at TBWA, and a co-founder of a successful agency that was acquired. A pivotal moment was inspired by almost unknowingly missing the last meal of her husband's homemade Bolognese, leading her to create the Bolognese Philosophy, a workplace well-being initiative. In this incredibly life-affirming conversation, Kaz shares her journey of processing the grief following her husband's death. She reflects on her realizations from almost missing their last meal together, to the significance of recognizing the small moments and appreciating the privilege of intimately knowing those in our lives. Kaz underscores the importance of embracing life's fragility, not taking anything for granted, and how whole life can feel when we can hold both its beauty and grief simultaneously. This conversation felt like a profound gift, and I believe it will leave you with a deeper awareness of life's uncertainties, along with an important invitation to focus on what is here right now. Look, this conversation was really special for me, and it felt like an honor to be able to listen to Kaz's experiences. And I took so many profound and meaningful perspectives from it, and I suspect that you will too. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And please continue to leave your lovely reviews if you're on the podcasting platform, as I greatly appreciate your support. Please check out the show notes below if you'd like to check out more of Kaz's work, as well as the podcast newsletter where you can read about the reflections that these conversations you're listening to have evoked in me. And a special announcement this week, you can also check out my recently announced 5-week course called The Silent Conversations, which I suspect offer much more meaningful and real ways of connecting with each other, and serve as somewhat of an antidote to the shallower ways we have of conversing or connecting these days. So look, that's all I have to say for this week. I look forward to carrying on the conversation with you next week. And so without further ado, the 104th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. Kaz, thank you very much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since our last conversation, I've been very much looking forward to this conversation and seeing where it goes today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
So, as you've been told or forewarned, the first question that I ask is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Oh my God, just one? So many. I think to do with a lot of the things I'm curious about is what do we attach our self-worth to and why? And I dive into that from a lot of the speaking that I do, whereas I feel like we're burning out more than ever, and I want to understand why, like really why. And I feel a lot of ours that I've talked to people, we hand over our self-worth to the thing that is bringing in money a lot of the time. Psychologically, I understand that from a pure transactional point of view, but our roles in society are so valuable. And I want to connect that all a whole lot more so that we can get back to the pure basics of existing better.
I love this expression, existing better. For you, when did this start to become an inquiry of yours?
I've tiptoed around pretty serious burnout a couple of times. And you think you learn from the first time, you head straight back in. You're like, like, am I losing my mind? That made me curious is why, when it was so bad the first time, I allowed myself to get back to that point. What am I missing? And so that has really got me there. And then I had a few huge wake-up calls on this journey, huge. And they have allowed me to not avoid this question. And those wake-up calls have been the sudden loss of a husband and almost unknowingly missing that last meal with him. And I haven't been able to not go back to that huge lesson every single time. Where am I pointing my self-worth? Where am I handing over control or losing control of my mental health and my physical health and my emotional health, and why? And so I believe the rug being pulled a few times in my life has allowed me to go, oh no, back to this question and even deeper. It's forced me into it. As much as I try and leave it alone, it keeps coming back. It's like, no, now you're going to go deeper on this. I'm like, okay.
Could you describe to me, first of all, even just the sense of experiencing it quite clearly and then thinking, okay, I've learned a lesson, and then going back to, or almost feeling like you're going back to it again, or it occurring again?
I mean, I definitely have gone in this circle of getting pretty close to bad burnout and losing grasp of making the right decisions throughout my day that I know are holding me together. And I know when I'm there, when my health starts to go, my brain is in overdrive for the wrong reasons, and I'm extremely emotional, like, teary, and just can't seem to get my hand on the fatigue. And then I know I'm at that point again. And the wake-up calls have been big, whether I've woken up one morning and realized that I don't have the passion and enthusiasm for the things that I used to love. My cat's just deciding to, there we go, that should be good for now. When I'm such a passionate, creative brain, and when I wake up and don't feel that excitement anymore, that's when I know I'm in a really dangerous space. When I'm lost the passion and enthusiasm for the things that excite me. Now, that can be my job. It can also be the sense of joy I feel from the people around me when the numbness starts to set in. And then I have to reset as quickly as I can, because I know that's a slippery slope down to becoming physically ill. That's my warning bell. When I feel that drain of enthusiasm and passion leaving me, I know that I'm going to also become physically ill pretty soon after, for me. And so I have to go back and get back to the things that hold me together. Exercise, nature, sunlight on my face, sitting down in deep conversation with the people that I truly love, maybe apologizing for being absent, being vulnerable with them and letting them know where my mental health currently is, clawing my way back again. I haven't gone back to that space for a while now, because I have so many tools in place now, and I talk about this a lot, so I want to make sure that I'm doing the thing that I say whilst helping other people.
Can you give me an idea of just that lovely expression to kind of, that feeling of you can't get a hand on the fatigue? Is something that
Yeah.
felt quite elusive or weighted about that.
It's almost as if you feel like it's out of your control. Like you have been worn down, well, you've worn yourself down, right? Because a lot of these are decisions that we allow to happen. You've worn yourself down to a husk of a human. That's what it feels like. I feel like a husk. And that's dangerous, right?
Mm.
And I know what I'm like. I'm getting to that point because it feels a little hollow inside. That's why I think I use the word husk. I'm not filled with that usual. I'm extremely optimistic person, so when I don't have that sense of joy and excitement, anticipation rolling around inside me, that's the thing that moves me around. And so when I feel like a husk, it means I kind of get up in the morning and there's just nothing there that's kind of forcing me in a direction to go and get stuff done mentally and in my heart as well. I'm like, whoo, we better go and find some ore today, ASAP.
But it's, I don't know about you, but I don't know what stage it just kind of became normal for this to be a part of our working lives. Like I lived in London before, and I remember I took a sabbatical to India, and then kind of kept in touch with a lot of people there that I had met, and it just kind of became so normal that anxiety was a part of the working world now, or stress. And these people are earning decent living or wages and all that. I'm not saying that there's not stress with certain positions, but I remember just kind of sitting back from it going, wow, this is really interesting that anxiety almost seemed to be a built-in part of a lot of people's lives that I was still in touch with there.
It's like a domino effect, I find. I've worked in a lot of high stress environments. So you've got advertising, you've got technology, and a lot of these it's like a domino effect, right? Like someone's energy and mindset on how an industry is supposed to run is more contagious than the flu. And so when you walk into a space and everyone's like, oh no, we're supposed to be like this, we're in long deadlines and working weekends, and so everyone's like, oh, okay, this is it, where it doesn't have to be like that at all, but we just accept this is the way that it is until we get hit with some huge life rug pull, whether that be facing our own mortality or that of someone around us. I don't know why we accept it. And I love to dive deep into like ripping off the fluffy wrapper that well-being gets, because I hate that well-being and wellness gets this like, when it's like vital. It's like if your being isn't well, that is linked to your mortality and everything that you touch and do throughout your day. So I question the things, to your point. Why did we accept them? How can we dive back in and start turning some things around? And right into the processes of those crazy lives. Like, I love to dive into really basic things, like how do you make a timeline in a huge company? Things that I don't think get a spotlight, but are so important when they set the pace for maybe thousands of people's lives and we don't question them.
Yeah.
Sometimes in these huge corporations, we get this timeline put in front of us, and everyone assumes that this must be it. This must be the pace we now need to work to. Someone's thought this through extremely carefully. We mustn't ask any questions or raise a flag about, hey, to provide excellence and to be a human, I might need a couple more days here. And we just do it. It's like we need to we need to frame our questions better, because well-being is at the core of everything: creativity, innovation, the way that you look out for humans. It's like if we don't have the space, then we just keep going on, like you say, like it just becomes this churn, and burnout's the highest it's ever been. What we're doing is just not working, and we need that ore back into our daily lives to survive.
Yeah. When you started kind of a trip or moving this question or moving along with the question around self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
what's that been? What's that relationship been like for you in terms of where you're deriving your self-worth? And you mentioned in connection with work, it's obviously so prominent, and it's almost in a wider sense, it's almost staggering, really. Like the the depth of what you or I are, anyone listening, is like the sheer, I don't know, the sheer capacities we have for connection, for love, creativity, whatever it may be. And then to see someone who you really care about or really love, and if something happens with their career, and
Mm.
for even with someone who you may perceive to be very secure, it's almost like I don't know, it's almost like their identity has been crippled or restricted in some way.
Yeah, and that's a form of grief, right?
Yeah,
When you are forced suddenly into a plot twist in life that you had attached your entire identity to. Oof,
yeah,
it's a deep grief of, hang on, wait, I was that, now I'm not. What? And how do you go back to know, oh, that was just a thing that I was doing, but it's not truly who I am 100% as a human being?
for you, was there a time where that that correlation between career and self-worth, like, is there a time where that began to untangle or disentangle some way, or how would you describe that?
I've had some milestones of reflection on that. I think it's been breadcrumbed to me in totally different scenarios along my journey. When I first started as a creative in advertising, you were surrounded by must win awards. That was your validation of worth in the industry. Awards, 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 awards. And so I was obsessed and hungry. And so I gave myself like a no fail option to win all the awards in the top shows. I was just like head down. This is where, I also get pretty close to burnout. But the realization for me was, I had a copywriter who was amazing, and we got to go to this country and stand on the stage and pick up this huge award. And I remember standing there with her and saying to her, I thought this would feel different. And I was shocked. And I remember going back to the hotel and I just sat there going, oh no, now what? This isn't the thing. It doesn't feel the way that I thought it would feel. And I had told myself this was everything. And then I was just like so confused. It was like, this didn't, it was a small moment of like, woo! But for me, innately as a human being, it didn't deliver the feeling that I thought it would. And I was like, oh, okay, because that's not what your entire life is about. But I had to learn that young. It was in my 20s. I had to learn that fast. And then again, with the sudden loss of my husband, you start realizing a few things. Because I was a workaholic, then I had to sit with the grief that I tortured myself with on that, knowing I had put my work before him a lot of the time, because I'm just an ambitious career person. And he was a glorious 9 to 5 electrician who would just look at me like I was an alien from a different country. Like his entire purpose was, I'm going to be an electrician. I mean, I like lights and I'm smart, but I really like fishing.
Yeah.
So my goal is, how do I get on that boat as fast as I can? And he'd always look at me when I'd work all the weekends like, I don't, he just, this is where we would be like this. Um, so those are two areas where I had to really check myself as far as the question that you were asking.
What was that grief you mentioned there in kind of coming to terms with being so kind of ambitious and hungry and driven in work, and then with the loss of your husband, like, what was that? How do you even, yeah, how do you even like engage with that?
Well, I couldn't for a long time, to be really honest. I um, I was so numb and thrown out of where I thought everything was going. Like, I went to bed one night and woke up the next day, and it was like my it was like ground zero. My entire life was gone. Everything was gone, and I couldn't. My brain was trying to find some type of grounding that he was my person. I'd been with him since I was 18. We've been together for 13 years. I'd grown up with him, and I was given the advice to go back to routine, which I know is a very standard grief therapy, psychology advice. I get back in there. I just couldn't. Walking back into the agency and sitting in my seat that I used to sit in and everything carrying on as normal made me want to throw up. And so I knew that I couldn't go back into that. And so I ended up creating my own agency for a while with a wonderful co-founder. But even then, when I thought I was ready to go in and sit down and carry out a normal day, I wasn't. I went and sat down, and then I burst into tears. And I looked at my co-founder. I'm like, can't do it. She's like, get out of here. I'm like, okay. It took me a long time. I was so worried that I wasn't going to be able to have another creative idea because it was so dark in my mind and in my heart. And as a creative, that is frightening. I was terrified. I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to return back to the creative industry, to be really honest. Yeah.
And just, you mentioned there the significance earlier of almost missing the last meal. Can you give me a sense of even how that unfolded?
Yeah. So it was a very classic scenario for any of those in the advertising world. It was about 6 p.m. on a Thursday night, and I was getting ready to go home. And a late brief came in, right? And so everyone was swirling around, and I got the sense that, okay, we're going to be a bit of a lock-in. You'd know that from Irish terms. We're going to be here for the duration. And then my phone rang, and it was my husband, Rua. And he said to me, look, you better be in that car on the way home. I've made bolognese, and I just really want to have dinner with my wife tonight. A very normal request from a husband, right? But I usually put up a bit of a response to this, which wasn't favoured, and there'd be some arguments and some debate. As I said, he was a glorious 9-to-5 man who wanted to go fishing. But there was just, I don't know, there was something in his voice on this night where I said yes. And then the guilt and the anxiety came from really having to go in and tell my coworkers, hey, I've got to go. I promised to be somewhere tonight, because I was so worried about, we're talking about self-worth, so worried about being judged as a slacker or not being seen as a team player, and all this negative self-talk. But when I went in and said to them, look, I need to leave tonight, I'll be back in the morning, they were really good. And that was a huge deal for me, because if any of them had said to me, hey, you know what, Kaz, we need you to stay tonight, it would have been that easy for me to stay. And I have so much compassion for, if that had happened, the people who had told me to stay, that it was that important. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Whew. And I can kind of probably say that missing that last meal may have pushed my grief to a point where I might not have been able to claw back, to be really honest. Like, it was touch and go for a few months there as it was. But if I had have not gone home that night and missed that, I laugh because that's just a nervous response to the darkness. I know that it would have been. But I got home, and I was only 20 minutes late, so I was very proud of myself. And he was so excited and flung the door open. He had this huge, beautiful smile. And he had the bolognese in the bowl. And I came in and I sat down, and we had a very, very normal night together. And then lost him at an accident the following day. Now, I go over that last night in detail in my mind all the time. There are bits that are blurry. I think it's because of the trauma. But there are still things I beat myself up about. I can't remember if I told him that the Bolognese was really good. It was always really good. I don't remember if I said I love you that night. I don't. I know I wasn't 100% present with him that night because of the way that my brain works. I would have been thinking about the work that I was doing the following morning. I know that, and that really upsets me. And so that has been the catalyst for how do I help others be present whilst grasping onto the fragility of life? Because it's a real thing. And I never saw that coming. Like, we were going to be together forever. Yeah, such a lesson.
Whew. Yeah, it's there's something so, you mentioned the fragility of life, and obviously presence in a final moment, and questioning, was I present? And it's there's probably millions of people tonight that are experiencing that very same thing. Maybe their partner will be there tomorrow, maybe they won't be, but it's, I don't know, it's such a just a stark like invitation, or a stark invitation sounds a funny combination of things to say, but just, I don't know, like, it really is that, like, it's these small moments, isn't it? Like, did I say that I love you? Did I say the bolognese is good? Like, it's just these sequence of small moments that I find kind of obviously very sad, and then stunningly beautiful, just the simplicity of it too, and in what you're reflecting on.
Yeah. There's things I do remember, like this little piece of hair used to always curl on the back of his neck, and I always found that really adorable. And so I remember noticing that, which is really interesting,
Yeah.
on a profile by being on the couch with him. I was like, huh. He was leaving the following day to go to the airport, and it was my job to drop him off. So I dropped him off. And as I was leaving, as I was going to give him a hug goodbye, he grabbed my bum and gave it a huge squeeze. That was how we would always say goodbye. And I am so happy that that was our last interaction, was just him grabbing my ass. I was like, that is just the best. There's this bit in the New Zealand airport where you pull up to drop off every time. And that's exactly where the ass grab happened. Every time I go to the airport, I look so fondly at that one spot. That was the last moment I ever saw him. And it was so sweet. And so him. And I feel like I've just dropped this little portal of love in that one spot at Auckland Airport. It's there for the whole time. Yeah.
That's staggeringly beautiful. I don't an arse grab in eternity, but no, but like the portal of love, like, there's something. This may sound strange, so I'll try and explain it in a way that makes sense. So a couple of weeks ago, as you know, we postponed this because there was a funeral on my wife's side of the family,
Yeah.
and that week I was playing with my daughter out in the evening, one of the evenings, and there's this movie called Arrival. I don't know if you've seen it, but
Name rings a bell. Aliens?
exactly, yeah. And so the consequence of this lady interpreting this alien language is that she can remember her future as much as she can remember her past as clearly.
Wow.
So she's having a child, and she knows she's going to lose the child, at a future point. And I think her partner can't bear this, so I think they end up splitting once he finds out about this, that she knew in advance. But I've always held very closely while having a daughter. Like, um, you know, sometimes consciously thinking like, could this be? What if this were the last time I took her to the playground or something like this? And I was listening to the soundtrack from this movie while playing with my daughter, and it may sound strange, but I was thinking about it again that night. Like, what if this were the last time that I was playing with her?
Yeah.
And the idea came to me that it wouldn't be a rush to just take her around the world or do some trip or something like that. It would be, could I pay such close attention to her right now that I'd remember this smile? Do you know what I mean? Things like this, and
Yeah.
that's why I find, like, and then just moments there where you're just like, this was absolutely this is Rua. This is so representative of him.
Yeah.
I don't know, when you say that, it just really makes me think, like, it really makes me think again of the significance of, can you see the person in front of you? Can you pay, like, can you, because these will be the things that you remember, if you know what I mean, or these will be the things that will remain as portals in time or portals of love, if you get me.
Yeah. 100%. And music is such an anchor for that too, right? There's so many stories I have related to the most oddest song that I know is his being playing to me in the strangest part of the world, and you're like, oh hi. Um, but yes, I have a few of those moments where you're right. It would never be about how elaborate do I make the last of our time. It will always be, how do I absorb and observe the beauty of the person in the moment? Doesn't matter. It doesn't. Their environment doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where we are. It
Yeah.
is just like inhaling all the things that you are so in love with about that human being, and you only get to observe that when you are still and aware. The way they
Yeah.
laugh, the way their eyes roll, the way they stay silent when they know they're supposed to answer a question. And that like a fingerprint, because I love the moments too when you're with that person, whoever it is, who knows you so well. And what an incredible experience it is to have those people in your life. You could be anywhere, in a coffee shop, in a crowded room, but you know exactly what they're thinking and doing from their mannerisms, right? You can see if that person's a little bit anxious from 20 yards away by the way
Yeah.
that they're holding their head, or the way they're leaning to a side, or the way their fingers tapping. Like, what a privilege it is to know that person that well.
Oh, amen. Like, that is, you just got me thinking about different people in my life, and what an honor that is, really, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the tapping of a finger, the shifting of a head. Even I'm picturing someone in my life who does this with their hands when they're nervous,
Yeah. 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 I know a few who do different things, and you're like, okay, right, we've got to get over that side of the room pronto. Got to get them out of that conversation immediately.
If you don't mind me asking, just when you touched on there, the hearing of a song, and almost like the kind of like, oh, hello, like, do you
All the time.
do you f- do you feel that, like a presence, or does it? I'm not asking you to elaborate some um either justification or theory, but just what's the feeling like for you in moments like that?
Uh, it depends on the moment. There was one that was just so obscure, and I just burst out laughing because it was so random and odd. I was in Peru about to go climb Machu Picchu. Not properly climb, I did the cheetah's climb, just so everyone doesn't think I'm overly adventurous. And it was this random little, built on the side of a hill, hotel in the middle of nowhere. And he would always sing the Escape song, the Pina Colada song. I don't know if you know that. Like Pina Coladas. Because he loved that it was a love story. He loved that it was two people who got to a point in their relationship where they started drifting apart. Those of you who don't know the lyrics to the song. And then one of them wrote an ad in the paper and the other one responded to it. And they just rediscovered all the things that they loved about each other again. It's such a great story. But that was what he'd sing in the shower really loud to me throughout the house all the time. And at his funeral, he was New Zealand Maori, so we had a cultural funeral in the marae, and part of the tradition is his body lies in the marae. Everyone who comes into the space has to first get up and tell a story about him, usually talking to him in first person, like he is here with us, alive now. And then to close that moment, you sing a song, a waiata. And so I got up and said some words, and I'm not a great singer, as you can tell, but I have some friends who are.
You did all right, to be
And
honest.
thank you. And so I got them around me, and we sung the Pina Colada song. And when I was in Machu Picchu, in the middle of nowhere, like seriously, middle of nowhere, no one's, it's not even English music being played on the radio. And then Pina Colada song comes on as I'm putting on my boots about to go up there. And I was like, no way. No way. And then I was just like cackling away. I was like, oh, hi. Didn't want to miss out on the adventure, I see. Get in. But just when it's so out there as a
Yeah.
moment, that's when I kind of really take notice. And then there are just subtle things that can happen throughout the day. Like I'm living in LA, so I don't hear a lot of New Zealand music ever. And there are some really prominent cultural bands that I grew up with that were Rua's favorite as well. And so to hear some of that can just be spontaneous grounding for me. And then I think of his face, and then I think of him singing the song, and it just kind of be like a, yeah.
I've talked to a number of people um, over the course of these 250 interviews where there's so many touches or suggestions or subtle nods to, I don't know, just there being so much more to this life and so much more to the presence of people around us. Um, and I don't know, there's just, every time I hear it, it just feels like there's something true to it.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like I don't care when people say such and such is a reality or not. Like I pay attention to how I respond to something.
Yeah.
And I can almost picture you just cackling laughing your head off, in Peru as this, obscure song for the setting comes on.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't think we have to question that much,
Yeah. The magic is there. We've got to believe in the magic. And, there's clearly more going on all the time,
Yeah.
all the time. Just the amount of beautiful coincidences that can happen, and the stories that we tell, like not believing that there is more under the surface for whatever you believe in. I I've always believed in all those things, and I can't imagine not. I just can't imagine thinking that this is it and nothing else exists after this or around this or at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the timing and the order of it. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but this, I don't know. There's like so much to what you're saying in in terms of just the paying attention, like the idea almost that like we can carry something with us, like, or we something stays alive within us, almost it's almost correlated with the level of attention we've paid something while it was there with us, like,
Mm.
which I just find, I don't know, really beautiful. Like I don't know, just in the desk that I have here at work, I have this like little angel from a deceased auntie of mine. And I don't know, like there's like, I'm not really one for possessions or much material things, if you know what I mean. And I don't know, this is just sometimes if I've got like a big appointment or something that I think, I feel like I do with support in, that just
Mm,
comes along in the bag with me, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
There's something really, I don't know, the continuity of life or the connection that still exists. Like, I don't know, there's something profoundly welcoming. Like, I think it's almost like a way of perceiving life or this universe or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and you were saying something before about the bond, uh, and where when we really invest in being present and listening to what that person needs or how they like to be loved, or just letting their personality have a safe container, we then get these beautiful, detailed memories in our files that we hold on to forever because we've given the time.
Yeah,
Otherwise, those files might be a little blurry around the edges, but with your connection to was it your aunt, did you say?
yeah, yeah,
You'll have some beautiful detail from your perspective where other people in your family might not have that. And one of my favorite things to do is when the family does come together, we may talk about one person who's no longer with us, whether it be a grandparent or an aunt or Rua. And especially listening to my nieces talk about Rua and the love that they felt and how they felt like it was just their Rua love. Oh, I could listen to those all day because that's not a perspective that I had. And their faces light up and they were like, when you used to do this and that and this. And I was like, tell me more, because I feel like I get to rediscover him even though he's not here in a physical sense. It's so good.
oh man, that is profoundly beautiful. That is yeah, just almost getting like a like finding or meeting, like finding something new or finding out like something new about a partner, and just in their expression of them or their interpretation of them. I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and encouraging that. I remember at first when the grief was really bad, I did this weird thing where I struggled with other people talking about their grief for losing him. I don't know what it was, but I was so overwhelmed with mine that I was almost selfish with it.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when in those early months when everyone else would talk about how much they're missing them, I almost felt like this is like this rage of anger being like, well, you miss him. Let me tell you about missing him, which is so odd and like not how we do things. But that was where I was at
Yeah.
that rough time. And then as I took some steps back and I managed to process all my own chaos, then that's when I landed on that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that bit about him. Can you tell me some more? What was it that, and then they're crying because they need their relationship validated with him. And because everyone was so wonderfully generous with making sure that the widow was looked after, I then realized, oh shit, I haven't been giving people their space to grieve him. And that was a massive realization. Huge for me.
It's so understandable though, isn't it?
So,
Like I could even imagine myself doing something, even having heard that. I could still imagine myself doing something very similar, even just
you're like, what?
going back to the start of the conversation, even in burnout and knowing it's coming, but still maybe doing something similar. But yeah, I could really just imagine that. Like, I think we don't suddenly become these enlightened beings just because, or we don't suddenly transform into something instantaneously. Um, so we're still all are wonderfully
Flawed.
manic, flawed, unique bundle of humanness. And yeah, for whatever reason, that attracts me a lot. The idea that
It's like, that's my grief. Hey, hang on a
yeah.
minute. I didn't say I was going to, you could have a part of that. I know, it's so crazy. Mm-hmm.
with with that moment, like with that experience, like how, and I know I literally can't imagine what the grieving of that would be, like how I'd experience that. But as you move through that, like what was that like? What was it like almost engaging in life even when you felt like the grief had been some ways grounded, or whatever way you'd what expression you could attribute to the grief, if you get me.
Where there are a few things. I didn't get professional grief counseling. I left that too long. So anyone listening to this, go and get some. This is beyond your. I thought I could do it. I waited a few years before I went and got some serious help, and I should have done that sooner for myself and for everybody around me. And if you don't find the right person at first, don't worry, just keep going till you find someone that you feel comfortable with. Please do that. I just want to underline that. The grief is always there, right? You just get a lot better at processing it so that you can move around the world and experience joy and love again. It doesn't become a barrier. And sometimes it pops up, and you're like doing really well, and it just goes boom. You're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, here's a classic example. When I first started dating again afterwards, I realized that if a person was late to a date, I would immediately think that they had died, and I could think of 5 ways on how they could have had a terrible accident on the way to meet me.
Yeah.
And so I would let guys know, hey, if you're going to be late, just text me, let me know, because this is where my brain goes, which is completely irrational.
Yeah.
But if you're late for anything and you're going to run, just let me know, because that's one of my things. It's just like, oh God, they're dead. Everyone's dead. Oh my God, what's happening? It's just so dark. And then knowing I'm doing okay is my brain is being creative again, and I'm well, and I've allowed love back in my life, not just from a partner, but from every direction. And being aware of that, being aware of when certain dates still pop up, because it's like it crystallizes in your body until a particular date arrives, and then it goes poof, and you're like,
Yeah.
for people, the first anniversary of someone passing, you think you're going to be okay. It's so fascinating. I'm like, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. And then the day hits, and it's like, my body didn't want to move. It's almost as if there's a clock in your system, and it remembers when that trauma hit, and it just, it's crazy. Don't be alone on the anniversaries of things. Birthdays and stuff will still pop up. I always, those things are always there, because you never want to forget the person. That's
Yeah.
what would happen. I would freak out if I hadn't thought of him for a bit. So I'm like, I don't want to forget you. And so then I'd sit down and I would go through some memories and just be like, okay, there you are. But I would feel guilt for almost moving on to the point where I hadn't thought of him for a while. I don't know if that's good or that's bad, but that was what I'd put myself through. Yeah.
I I don't know. I really love the sense of grief kind of accompanying us through life, and in moments it may seem like it's dormant, and then just suddenly it comes to the surface again.
Yeah. Boom.
Yeah.
It's definitely suddenly sometimes.
But just, I don't know, like, this is the this is this life, right? Like, this is, how would we know someone meant something to us, if if it didn't accompany us, like, if it didn't, if we're capable of the smiles when a song comes on, or the illumination when hearing new stories or perspectives of them. I guess then we also have to be open to that, whether it's sudden or subtle, or whatever it may be. Like, that's part of the balance of it all, or something, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like at first, it's so raw. It's like all your nerves are exposed.
Wow.
And so everything sets you off. It's just it's too much. And then over time, you learn to make you soothe the rawness, right? And you soothe the nerve endings. And so you get to still have things that are like, oh, there it is, but they don't collapse you to your knees. You can almost grab them and look at them in beauty rather than in pain. And that's awesome.
But there's something about holding something so painful and seeing the beauty in it, which I think is, I know you mentioned even at the start of this, like, can we get more moments of awe into our life if we're not feeling a certain spark or something? But I get there can be just that sheer level of awe. But I think there's something divine about being able to hold the sadness and the beauty at the same time. Like, that's almost like
Mm,
a contact with God, in whatever way you want to describe that. But there's just something so beautiful, like, or something so full or whole, in being able to experience that simultaneously.
yeah, because I suppose that pain is always coming in one way or as part of our human existence, right?
Yeah, 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 completely.
And we we foolishly live in this forever themed world. I'm always questioning that too. How do we get to thinking everything will just keep lasting forever when it's so fragile?
Yeah.
And we avoid a lot of confrontation and pain because it's uncomfortable. But if you can grab it and, like you're saying, look at the beauty of it, and that is still evidence that you are here and you're alive and you experienced something great. You experienced something so great, it's profoundly affecting you, and that's okay, and that can be amazing.
Like, it's just staggering, isn't it? Like, the breadth of experience that's possible
Yeah.
in this life.
And what we switch off.
Oh God. Yeah.
Why do we switch that off?
I I, I don't know. Like, it's such a good question. Like, I definitely I definitely feel that I pay attention to this life, that I often hold, or I come into contact with life,
Mm.
and yet still there can just be hours where in the day where I could just try to get away from it, or at the end of the day, just as you say, just try to switch off. Like, I'm in
Yeah.
a in an oddly kind of very present kind of couple of weeks with my wife and child, and I'm kind of like going to her like, why aren't we always doing? Do you mean, like, we're actually enjoying this? Like, why don't we?
Yeah.
why isn't this always the way? Like, do you know what I mean? And I get that there's polarities, and even when we're talking about breadth of the breadth of experience, but there is something a little bit tragic to me just in the accessibility we have, like, i.e. technology, for switching that off, like, for not coming into contact with the moment, or even things that you're pointing to beforehand, of moments that we just don't come into contact with our own creativity, of our own aliveness. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's all this experience you're describing here is obviously such a there's no escaping that. It's so considerable.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's many fluctuations within that overall experience and that grief. And yeah, I really don't have I don't have a good answer to why do we want to switch off from this. It's something that I contemplate semi frequently, and I don't really get somewhere close to it.
Yeah. Why do we switch it off? I don't know, maybe because to your point, there are so many things that we like as a pleasant distraction or a numbness, like a to gloriously numb out and not think about anything. We're getting good at that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah,
Netflix. Thanks, Netflix. Um, why, to your point, when if we close down the computer for a bit and look around or called someone, the depth of meaning to that for us and for that person would be huge, but we avoid it. Um, yeah, we fool ourselves a lot of the time that things will last forever. I'll
yes,
get to that. That's what
yeah,
it is.
yeah, yeah,
Oh no, there'll be another one of those moments. Oh, I've had one of those moments. Oh no, there will be more. I'll see them again for dinner. Um, I'm going home this Christmas, so this is very heightened for me. I wasn't going to, but I feel like this is a really core, foundational Christmas in my family for a few reasons. And I'm more tuned into the fact, that there are some people in my family that are getting older, noticing that forever world polish is wearing off pretty quickly. These last few years are going to be really important. And I can fool myself as much as I want that things will be forever and I'll always be able to reach out to that person, or I'll have that moment to tell that person how important they were in my life, or they know. But to actually sit and close that circle and truly just say, hey, I just wanted to tell you how important you are to me. And we don't do it enough. And I just want you to know that we need to do so much more of that.
I I must say, because I've literally been holding this little angel the whole time we've been talking since I picked it up. But I must say, when that auntie of mine who passed, who was really very very I was really very very close with, like, I think it wasn't a standard nephew auntie relationship. We were so frequently in contact. And I think that's one of the things that gave me a lot of almost solace in that experience, was she knew exactly what I thought of her. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? So just when you're saying that there, it also got me thinking of just times where, I don't know, we might put on Netflix or whatever streaming thing instead of calling someone, and we'll say, oh, well, I'll do that next week. And you're right, like, we take so much for granted. Like, or even if you were to assume with anyone, like, oh, well, I'll catch them next month.
Yeah.
And I know we can't live every day like this is our very last moment. That would be pretty intense, or that would be pretty heavy as well, right? But
Yeah. There's an awareness to that though.
yeah, you could completely. And so that it's, you know, just that it's not in this almost numb version or closed off version of the potentiality of life, and that where none of us are promised anything. That wasn't part of the deal. Like, that wasn't part of the agreement. And I don't know, like, not only will I take a runny nose from the amount of times that I felt um, greatly moved by what you're sharing, but I think it is just that. Like, can we just hold that a little bit closer? Like, as I say, because I take immense. It may sound like a strange thing when I say sometimes I contemplate my daughter's mortality, but I can even feel the feeling when she's in my arms and I just squeeze, like, she's facing me to the front and I just have my arms around her, my arms around her, and I squeeze her just for a second, just 1 second. I squeeze her a little bit tighter, and I don't know. There's so much of what you've shared here that I think gives such an emotional depth or association with that. What can sometimes feel like a very floaty intellectual contemplation of death. Do you know what I mean? Like, almost in this, well, this tradition do it. Otherwise, sometimes people talk about that, but like, just such weight to it, like the touch, like the things we notice, as you say, the small things that we notice in terms of the micro behaviors of someone that we've had the privilege of knowing that they allow us into our life. The flick of hair at the back of the neck, the really romantic grab of the arse, the pina colada songs, the keeping somebody alive through in-depth memories and paying attention and the different perspectives. I don't know, there's so many stunning things. Like, I must say, Kaz, you've just if this was a normal conversation, and they are normal conversations, but I really just would have stopped a number of times just to sit with a number of things you've shared, because they've been, I don't know, profoundly beautiful and sad, and profoundly sad and beautiful, and life affirming as well. And I guess in the interests of maintaining tradition on this podcast, I'd love to, in the context of all that we've talked about, I'd love to ask you the question of what is a good life for you?
A good life for me is allowing the awe to come in whilst still holding a firm grasp on the fragility of life. It's both things, right? Because you can't have the pendulum swing so far into, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
but those two things together change the decisions that you make on a daily basis. Yeah.
Kaz, I just want to say, I just feel, I don't know, compelled to say it's been such an honor and such a privilege to share this conversation with you. Honestly, like, it's, I don't know, it's rare to feel as touched by something so often, so frequently, and I assume for anyone listening too, just the like, not only just the lessons, but the felt experience that I hope that many of us carry from this conversation, because I think it's, I don't know, just deeply, deeply important. And thank you so much for joining us on the What is a Good Life podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and having the knowing how to ask the right questions, because that is an art, Mark, and the space that you hold for it. So the reason this flowed so well is because of your expertise on how to manage the energy throughout it. So thank you.